Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com. Today we're in round 3 of our coverage of the 2015 London Chess Classic. The first 2 rounds have not been the most exciting in my opinion. There's been 10 matches. There's been only 1 victory, and that was Anish Giri over Topalov in the first round that we covered. But in round 3, looking for some more fireworks. Hopefully some players kind of loosen up a little bit. It's usually in these big tournaments you expect a little bit of slow play at the beginning, and then as players start to realize that they need to get some wins to actually win the tournament, starts to loosen up a little bit. So that's what we're going to be expecting in the next few rounds. But our match today, White's going to be played by the 25-year-old Frenchman Maxime Vachier Lagrave, and his opponent's going to be played by Topalov. I like to cover Topalov just because he is an exciting player. He always has some crazy openings, and also he's in the lead of the Grand Chess Tour. This 3 tournaments, he won the first one in Norway, and then it did fairly well in the Sinkfield Cup, and so looking to have a strong performance here to kind of claim the entire crown, but he has to be careful. He lost the first round against Anish Giri, and so he can't falter any way the rest of the tournament. Really looking for a victory here. But Maxime starts with pawn to e4, and then we see the Sicilian with pawn to c5. From here, Maxime continues with knight to f3. We see pawn here to d6, pawn to d4, capture after the knight recaptures on d4, knight to f6, knight c3. And this is kind of a turning point of what is Topalov going to defend with. There's a lot of variations in the Sicilian defense. He opts for the Najdorf defense, one of the stronger options out there. And we see an interesting move from the Frenchman. He plays pawn here to h3. Not the most common move. This is the Adams attack. It's somewhat there to kind of catch your opponent off guard. Najdorf defense, you're really expecting, you have your knight or your bishop here to g5. That's pretty popular after here, pawn to e6, pushing up here, pawn to f4, getting ready to castle on the queen side, and then it's just an all-out blitz. Black's looking to castle on the king side, and then it's just people going at each other's throats. If we don't see bishop there to g5, another one would just be bishop here to e3, very common. You could also see the Fischer attack with bishop here to c4. This is what I typically play. I really like to get my light square bishop involved. Usually going to bring it back here to b3. Can always play pawn here to a3 and kind of kick it back here on a2. And this really controlled this long light square diagonal here. Always nice, especially when black is usually going to be playing this pawn here to e5. No pawn is going to be blocking off this pawn chain or this long light square diagonal here, so that's always nice. But we see the Adam attack here with pawn here to h3. And then pawn here to e5, and then knight's going to come back here to e2. And this is kind of a how this Adam attack goes. Really looking to play pawn here to g4 later. Now play knight to g3 behind that, and then start to push forward. Castle on the queen side, and then just go all-out blitz again on the king side. Now, with this said, knowing kind of what white wants to do, we see black respond accordingly. He plays pawn here to h5, making sure that this pawn to g4, which would be an extremely good move if this pawn wasn't here, is not allowed right away. We do see pawn here to g3. This bishop can't really develop outside of this knight right here, so getting ready to fianchetto the bishop here to g2. And now we see knight here to d7, bishop here to g2, and then pawn down here to b5. Since this knight is on here on d7, this light square bishop's not going to be doing too much going this direction, so instead wants to go ahead and start to attack on the queen side in case his opponent does decide to castle on the queen side. He can also fianchetto his bishop here to b7, trying to control this light square diagonal as well. Knight up here to d5, capture and recapture with the queen. Wants to make sure he holds on to this e4 square with his bishop protecting. And then attacking the rook. The rook's going to come there to b8, and then bishop here to e3. Not really any other moves. Wants to make sure he still has this opening for the queen to come back. But does want to make sure he develops this bishop in case he wants to castle on the queen side. Now bishop here to e7. Getting ready to castle on the king side. Queen coming back here to d2. Knight here to f6, attacking this pawn here on e4. And then castling on the king side. Was really hoping to see castle on the queen side. I think it's completely fine. We've just been more exciting game in my opinion. Not that the game is not exciting, but anytime both sides are castling on the opposite sides of the board, it's pretty much just throw everything you can at that side of the king, and so that's what we would have seen. Pawn here to b4, pawn pushing up forward here to g5, and this is just kind of a race, and it would have been pretty chaotic. But we didn't see that. Instead on board, instead of castling on the queen side, we see castle on the king side. Topalov responds with the castle on the king side as well. Then we see the king come here to h2. Protecting this pawn, wants to make sure that his light square bishop here doesn't have to hold on to this as well. Also allows for the knight to come here to g1. If he wants to place it a little bit different, maybe here to f3 later on, can also do that. The bishop here to b7, as we talked about, it really wants to control this long light square diagonal here and wants to start attacking this pawn right here. Both the knight here on f6 and his bishop here are both attacking the pawn. Light square bishop is the only piece defending this, and so white's going to play knight here to c3, adding another defender right here. And then we see rook over here to c8, attacking this knight, and now pawn to a4. I really don't like pawn here to a4. Black is getting ready to push forward with pawn here to b4, forcing this knight away. And so I really like pawn here to a3. I think it's just a lot more solid. It stops black from doing what he wants to do. Pawn here to a4, I don't really think does that. So after pawn here to a4, as we can imagine, pawn pushing forward here to b4, trying to remove the defender. So we have this knight and this bishop here on g2. You always want to look at the overloaded piece, and that's kind of what this pawn here on e4 is. And so if we can kind of remove this defender, this opens up the door for these pieces to kind of overload and take this pawn. Now white really plays the only move he has, and that's to play knight here to d5, kind of stopping the bishop from attacking this, and we do see an exchange on board. Now pawn here to a5, kind of solidifying this pawn chain right here. So if we kind of look on board right here, we have a backward pawn here on d6. White can definitely look to attack that. Also has a backward pawn here on a5. If he can get rid of this, he has a pass pawn that he can start to push forward on. On the opposite side of the board, we see a semi-open file for this rook here on c8, so kind of controlling this. Both sides have double bishop pairs, so not a real advantage for either side. There's still a lot of pawns on the board, so a lot can go on from this position, but right now it's fairly equal on board. Now we see Maxime play queen here to e2, wants to make sure he's still holding on to this pawn on c2 since it is being attacked by the rook up here on c8. Bishop down here to g5, and then we see the bishop take here on g5 as we just talked about. The queen can't come here to h5 because then we're just going to see bishop to e3. And then after the pawn takes, we're going to see rook come down here to c2. That's going to be very, very bad for white. So instead, we see the bishop just take here on a g5. After the queen recaptures, the pawn's going to come up here to h4, forcing the queen to come back. Now the queen comes back here to f6. I'd rather prefer just the queen coming back here to e7 to protect this bishop here on b7. And you'll see that even more because after the queen comes here to f6, this queen's going to spring into action, both attacking the bishop here on b7 and this pawn here on a5, and black's forced to play queen here to e7. He could also just try to protect his bishop, but his pawn's going to fall. So he just kind of wasted a move, in my opinion, because he just brought his queen back here to e7. But Topalov is a very smart player, so I'm sure there was a reason that he decided to go ahead and just have this in-between move and it eventually just come here to e7, or he could have just kind of overlooked that. But the queen's now going to come here to a5, and now white has a pawn that he can start pushing on board. So decides to go ahead and give up this pawn here on c2, which I completely agree with. Anytime you can exchange pawns and come out with a pass pawn, that's definitely going to be a good thing. Now rook over here to a c1, and then rook takes here on b2. Now rook over here to b1, rook over here to a2. The queen captures. Now the bishop comes here to a6, attacking the rook, and the queen comes here to b3, attacking the rook. They're just going to exchange these pieces on the board, and then all of a sudden we see rook coming over here to a8. So in the exchange, I feel like white definitely came out on top. He has the pass pawn right here on a4. He can just push all day long. It's going to be very difficult for black to kind of hold on to this. Not the biggest advantage, but definitely a better pawn structure than kind of black has. He doesn't have tons of material that he can really back as far as he pushing this forward, and he still has this pawn here on f2 that's stopping this pawn here from just pushing freely up the board. Pawn up here to a5. Anytime you have a pass pawn, you always want to make sure you push it. So that's what Maxime is doing. Pawn here to e4, rook up here to b3, just making sure that it kind of stops it. Doesn't want this pawn to go any further. A pawn out here to f5, just solidifying the pawn chain right here. And then queen over here to do d2. I think queen to d2 is a pretty bad move. I get it. Wants to make sure that he has more pieces over here, stopping any sort of threat that black has and protecting the pawn over here on a5. But it's just way more dangerous to play pawn here to a6. It's really tough for black to stop this. Pawn here to f4, trying to blow things up, but then rook up here to b7. You always want to get your rook on your opponent's 7th rank if you're white, 2nd rank if you're black. This is very tough. The pawn can now come here to a7. White has to, or black has to deal with this the entire game, so very, very difficult. I just don't think that just playing the queen here to d2 is as strong as just pushing the pawn. But that's still okay. He still has a pass pawn, but now it's just kind of under fire. The queen's now attacking it. The rook is attacking it. Now queen over here to a b2 decides, I'm going to go ahead and give up that pawn for a strong attack on the king side. And so after the rook takes here on a5, I would have preferred the queen take it, just because rook here to b7 is very tough. We saw it before. Anytime you can get your rook on the 7th rank, this is going to be good. Kind of forcing black to kind of make a move here and then getting this queen involved. This king's pretty safe over here on g2. I just feel like it would have been better. Queen taking here on a5, getting that pass pawn. All of a sudden, black is up a pawn in material, and he's not super worried yet, even if the rook were to come here to b7 or anything like that. But decides to go ahead and take with his rook. Now the rook comes up here to b7. Rook down here, both attacking the queens. That's fine. The queen just comes up here to b5. And then Topalov plays very, very questionable move. I haven't seen a move this bad in a long time in a big tournament. He plays rook takes here on f2, and the king's just going to take. And I'm not sure if he maybe thought he saw a threefold repetition, because he knew the king was going to take, and so he knew he was going to bring his queen down here. But the problem is, it's pretty easy to defend this. You just play queen here to e2. You're never going to be able to get past this, and now all of a sudden you're down a rook in material. And Topalov, after this, was forced to resign. He recognized that he made a blunder, but it's not. He didn't really say why he decided to go ahead and take there. My guess is he miscalculated and thought that he had a threefold repetition where he could just check, check, check. There was nothing that white could do, and they would just have a drawn game because he didn't like his position. So in the first 3 rounds, Topalov has lost 2 of his matches, so not going well for him. Kind of opens up the door for everyone that was ranked behind him for the Grand Chess Tour. But congratulations to the 25-year-old Frenchman Maxime. Really well played against such a top player, and you don't see the Adam attack, all that often. So always good to see someone attack the Knight Order defense and come out with a win. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the tournament. This round was more exciting than round 2, in my opinion. Round 1, definitely the match that we looked at was pretty entertaining as well. So excited for more chess over the next week, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.